The baby's cry was a thin, reedy sound barely audible through the cheap monitor I'd placed strategically in the old apartment. But the sight of the soaked crib, the tiny blanket clinging to those telltale strands of black hair, my hair meticulously placed, was music to my ears. Henry, my former protégé, now a broken man, would soon be fully convinced. He thought he could escape me, but no one escapes Victor Kane. Not truly. His wife Lily, her face a mask of terror, clutched their son, her voice a reedy whisper about leaving. Oh, the sweet satisfaction of watching their meticulously built life crumble piece by agonizing piece under the weight of a phantom I had conjured. That moment, watching his world unravel from the quiet safety of my own curated chaos, was the culmination of months, years even, of meticulous planning. It began as all my finest works do, with a simple observation of weakness, a quiet desperation in his eyes that screamed prey. I remember Henry Miller, a name as bland as the life he'd always envisioned for himself. Growing up in the quiet neighborhoods of upstate New York, his days were filled with simple joys, the kind of mundane contentment that made my stomach churn. Playing ball, Sunday dinners with his grandmother, a saccharine tableau of normalcy. My own childhood, a decaying tenement in a town that smelled of rust and regret, had taught me that such peace was a dangerous illusion. It was a luxury I could never afford, a weakness I would never again tolerate in myself or in those I chose to engage with. Victor Kane, was destined for more than simple joys. I was destined for control, for a legacy carved from the ruins of others' expectations. I met Henry during one of my early forays into the upstate art scene, a particularly dreary gallery opening that reeked of stale wine and unfulfilled ambition. He was an aspiring graphic designer, earnest and painfully naive, clutching a glass of cheap Chardonnay like a life raft. His gaze, wide and impressionable, seemed to absorb every word I uttered, every casual name drop of a fictitious connection, or an exaggerated deal I was supposedly brokering with a curator at the Met. Most people were so utterly predictable, their vanity a gaping wound I could always exploit. Henry was no different. He saw in me the charisma, the confidence, the effortless sophistication I projected, the very antithesis of his own quiet, unremarkable existence. He was drawn to me like a moth to a flame, utterly blind to the inferno I truly was. My voice, smooth and laced with a calculated flattery, quickly ensnared him. Henry, my dear boy, I'd purr, my cedar and amber cologne a subtle lingering weapon in the stale air. You possess an eye for detail, a sensibility few truly grasp. You understand the nuances, don't you? Unlike so many others who simply exist. He would preen, of course. Pathetic, really, but profoundly useful. I saw the hunger in him, not for wealth or power, but for validation, for a purpose beyond his pedestrian dreams. A weakness I could sculpt, mold, and ultimately shatter. The silver ring, Peter's ring on my right hand, felt cool as I twisted it, a familiar comfort. Peter would have hated this game, this slow, insidious dismantling of a human spirit. But Peter wasn't here, was he? And I had to ensure I would never be that helpless again. The initial phase was delightful, a delicate dance of psychological erosion. I would praise his work, then subtly critique it, suggesting it was not quite ready for the grand stage, planting seeds of doubt that blossomed into crushing insecurity. You're the only one who truly understands my vision, Henry. I'd tell him, my voice a soothing balm, unlike everyone else who's betrayed me. This, of course, was a lie, a carefully constructed narrative of my own victimhood designed to bind him closer while isolating him from anyone who might offer a different perspective. It was a technique I'd honed after that disastrous deal with the collector in Chicago, the one whose secrets I'd meticulously buried in my pocket notebook before he crumbled. I learned then that direct confrontation was messy. Subtle corrosion was far more elegant, more effective. His self-worth began to fray. His once bright eyes dimmed, replaced by a constant, almost pleading need for my approval. My sharp words, delivered with a detached calm, stung him more deeply than any physical blow. "You're worthless without me, Henry," I'd murmur, watching the flicker of pain in his eyes, a tiny, satisfying tremor of control. "Your ideas, your very existence, are merely reflections of my own brilliance." He would flinch but never truly resist. He was so desperate to believe in the gilded cage I'd built for him, so afraid of losing the false sense of purpose I'd bestowed. His world, once small and secure, was now entirely defined by my whims. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, a testament to my ability to bend others to my will. By the time we were living together, a calculated move on my part to ensure maximum proximity for observation and control his behavior became erratic, a twisted mirror of the chaos I'd once known in my own childhood home. He'd pace, muttering to himself, scratching at his scalp until his hair came away in clumps, leaving angry red streaks on his skin. He suggested therapy, the fool. "I don't need help, Henry." I hissed, my eyes wild with feigned hysteria. "You're the one who's broken, who's holding me back." And for a time he believed me, the weight of my words crushing his self-worth until he didn't recognize himself in the mirror anymore. He was a canvas upon which I painted his own destruction. Desperation led him to hire a private investigator, a grizzled old fool with a perpetually skeptical gaze. I found the hidden cameras, of course. A pathetic attempt. Did he truly think he could outsmart me? The one who had navigated the treacherous waters of the art world, outmaneuvering rivals who sought to expose my financial instability. After that gilded frame debacle, emerging stronger, more cunning, I simply used his attempts against him. His documentation of my outbursts became my script. His fear of my threats became my stage directions. I even scrawled a note, "You'll never escape me," and taped it inside his closet door, knowing he'd see it every morning, a chilling reminder of his inescapable fate. The art of psychological warfare, you see, is about making the victim complicit in their own torment. The night he finally snapped was glorious. "I'll kill you, Henry," I shrieked, my voice echoing through the apartment, carefully modulating the pitch to convey a raw, unhinged fury. He locked himself in the bedroom, dialing the police, his hands trembling. Each pound of my fists against the door was a symphony of his crumbling resolve, my guttural shrieks cutting through the air like a blade. The police arrived predictably to find my arm burned from the stove, a self-inflicted wound, of course, a minor inconvenience for the grand performance. "He did this to me," I accused, tears streaming down my face, a masterpiece of feigned vulnerability. But this time Henry presented his evidence. The photos, the videos, the recordings. For a fleeting moment, a sliver of doubt, a whisper of a challenge to my control flickered within me. I'd pushed him too far. This wasn't the plan. My carefully constructed reality seemed on the verge of unraveling, much like that high-stakes theft of the stolen canvas where a mark had almost turned the tables, a rare sensation being outplayed. That memory fueled the cold rage that now simmered beneath my skin. I twisted my silver ring. No, I would not allow it. I would not be the powerless boy again watching Peter slip away. I would not be caught. As they led me away in handcuffs, my face twisted into something unrecognizable, a mask of pure hatred. I savored the moment. This was not defeat. This was merely the next act. My screams followed him long after the door shut, planting the seed of the haunting that would consume him. My family, easily manipulated by a carefully crafted narrative of my victimhood, whisked me out of state to a secluded property on Lakeview. The perfect stage for my disappearance. The perfect backdrop for a new, insidious torment. The drowning was a masterful stroke, a final, definitive act of control. My body, never to be recovered, became a ghost story, a legend, a perpetual haunting for Henry. The news of my death reached him, of course. His mother's tearful call relayed by one of my informants describing his guilt. Oh, the sweet irony. He should have felt relief, but instead a gnawing guilt consumed him. It was delicious. Months passed. I observed him from a distance through the network of cameras and informants I'd meticulously placed. He tried to rebuild his life the fool. He even became engaged to some insipid woman named Lily, a fragile balancing act where the mundane tasks of life felt impossibly heavy. He thought he was free, he thought he was safe. Then the haunting began. My haunting. One quiet night I slipped into his apartment wearing gloves, leaving faint muddy footprints near the door leading toward the crib. The baby monitor crackled and I whispered into it, my voice distorted by a cheap voice modulator. "I'm gonna kill you, Henry." The thrill of it, the sheer unadulterated power of turning his own life into a horror show, was intoxicating. I was the puppeteer, and he, unaware, was dancing to my tune. The incidents escalated. I flickered the lights remotely, created cold spots with carefully placed ice packs. Lily began to notice her initial skepticism crumbling under the weight of the inexplicable. "Henry, I heard someone crying last night," she whispered to him, her eyes wide with worry. It sounded like a woman, but it didn't feel human. Her voice quivered, and I could practically taste her fear. The fear was starting to seep into every part of their lives, eroding the trust and safety they had tried to build. My influence, like my cologne, lingered long after I was physically gone. One night, as he sat alone in the living room, I turned on the television remotely. Static filled the screen before my familiar voice, distorted and dripping with malice, emerged from the noise. "You thought you could escape me." The static morphed into an image of my face, pale and distorted, my lips curling into a grotesque smile. My face, the one he thought he'd escaped. My breaking point. Noah's breaking point. When I found their son's crib, his tiny blanket clammy to the touch, reeking faintly of lake water, I knew I had succeeded. Strands of black hair, my hair clung to the fabric. Lily's face turned white as she held the baby close. "We have to leave," she said, her voice trembling. They packed what they could and left that night, seeking refuge at his parents' house. I followed. The first few nights were calm, but then the nightmares began. I projected holographic images into his room, my body bloated and waterlogged, standing at the foot of his bed. My voice whispering in his mind, "You'll never be free." He's tried everything to protect his family, holy water sage, even a priest. Pathetic. But nothing has worked. My presence lingers, my fury a storm that won't dissipate. Shadows stretch unnaturally long in the dim light, whispering his name in voices that sound like mine, but twisted and broken. Last night, as he stood by the crib, I used a remote to crack the mirror across the room, spidering outward as if an unseen hand had struck it. And from its jagged surface, I ensured he saw my reflection staring back at him, my lips curling into a malicious grin. I don't know how much longer they can endure this. Lily has started keeping a knife under her pillow, her eyes sunken with sleepless nights. Their son's laughter has turned to silence, as though he senses the weight of what lurks around them. All I know is that Victor Kane is not done with him yet. Not by a long shot. This is my greatest work, a living canvas of psychological torment. And sometimes in the dead of night, I wonder if I ever will be. The thought of it, this endless, exquisite control, sends a shiver of pure satisfaction through me, a validation of my power that even the emptiness of the gallery after a failed deal or the lingering guilt over Peter cannot diminish.